Hello, everybody, wherever you are. We are extremely happy that you are joining us for this panel, which is the official title of Climate Change and Gender Equality. And to make a good start, we only have women speakers. So this is balancing other panels, I think. At the same time, let me say that this is not just a women's issue. And I'm sure my dearest colleagues will stress that again as well. But just to make sure, because women are presenting doesn't mean men are not welcome to join us and be in this session. I want to make you aware of the fact that this session is recorded, and that you can ask questions through the platform that you are on that will reach me, and we'll try and answer them to the best of our ability. Having said that, why are we doing this session? Well, the negative sort of connotation was women are the victims. And that was more or less the subtitle for this session. But that doesn't mean much, does it? What does it mean that the women are impacted more than the men by climate change? I don't like the word victim, so impacted. One is, just to give you 2-3 very quick examples. When there is a lot of drought in the area where they live, what you see, especially when they are relying on agriculture, both for their food, but also as an income for the family. Drought causes enormous problems, both in terms of irrigation of their lands, but also in terms of getting hold of enough drinking water and water to wash. So what happens there? First, they are impacted because they're usually the one that has to go and find the water. But also what happens is that in a lot of countries, especially in the South, the younger men then leave because they think they will better off in the city. And what happens is that we get a lot of one female households that have to cope for themselves. And this is really, really a big problem. So it starts with internal displacement. And after a while, it gets so bad that also the women and their children decide to go to the city. Whether that's an improvement is up for debate, but for sure, that's what's happening. The second one is flooding. What you see is that we get more water in a shorter period of time, that the systems can't cope with it. And then you get a few things. One, you get contaminated water because all kinds of stuff ends up in there, which is not good for water quality, and might cause diseases, which, because of their bio makeup, impacts the women and the children quicker than the men. But also what happens is that people drown because they were, for instance, never allowed to learn how to swim. Or you get mud streams that they don't know where to go because the government might have warned them that the floods are coming, but they don't tell them where to go and hide. They just don't tell that to the women. They might tell it to the men, but not to the women. And they are the ones in charge. So another bad impact. What is obvious is that the say of women over natural resources, the land, the water, is much less than that of the men. Usually the owners are the men, and they are the ones that are addressed. And then it's completely up to the head of household to make sure that the rest of the household gets the knowledge, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. If it comes to negotiating with local authorities, lots of times the women are not being taken serious. They're not even invited. So they are excluded from the ideas on how to react to the impacts of climate change. The second part is the reverse. There are a lot of women in the world that are very good at adapting their local situation to what they experience. They might not call that climate adaptation. They probably not even know the word, but they're taking measures in their own communities and in their own households to address whatever is happening around them. The big problem with that is that they're doing plenty, but usually not acknowledged for what they're doing, usually not really supported for what they're doing. So there is a big lack of support to people locally who know what to do. They are very creative, but they don't get enough support and acknowledgement. They are not in the decision-making role. So those are a few impacts, and I'm quite sure my colleagues will address some of them, especially from their perspective where they are. We have 3 speakers today. Unfortunately, our colleague HADEEL, due to the internet being down in where she lives in Palestine, is a bit of a problem. 3 brilliant ladies who will give you their take on climate change, what it means for women and what it means for equality. And I'm very happy that they made a video to introduce themselves. So CARLA, DOHA and ADENIKE, welcome again. And I request the people from the technique to start the video, and we will be coming back to you.
Hello everyone, I am Carla Toranzo, CEO of Agua Global, a non-profit working at the Latin American level to help our region move towards the SDG 6 targets. Even Latin America has more than 30% of the world's fresh water. The majority of our people doesn't have sustainable water security. The gaps in sanitation are enormous, and the climate change variable, especially reflected in gray droughts and gray floods, is worsening the situation. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by poor wash infrastructure. The lack of clean water, decent toilets, good hygiene, and collapsed sewage systems after floods impact them more than men. For instance, lack of electricity at healthcare facilities makes water pumps stop working and thereby disrupts services. Poorly lit latrines expose women and girls to an increased risk of sexual assault and violence. Women and girls are affected by several health risks, such as infections due to inadequate wash infrastructure. In low and middle-income countries, preterm birth and low infant birth weight are associated with inadequate wash for pregnant women. Climate change is worsening this situation. For example, the great floods that caused the collapse of sewage systems or the restriction of drinking water in northern Peru at the beginning of this year resulted in several people getting sick with dengue, stomach, skin, and other illnesses. Inadequate or collapsed hospitals or medical posts are another critical situation they have to face. Women and girls are generally responsible for fetching water, attending to children, elderly, and the sick, and performing household chores, as cooking, washing. These tasks frequently prevent them from working or attending school, technical institutes, or universities, keeping them in a situation of dependency and vulnerability. Women possess invaluable knowledge with regard to water resources and play a key role in water and sanitation management at the local and community levels. Accordingly, women must have equal access to water and equal say in the management and governance of water resources. We need women's knowledge and talents for a better world for all. Gender inequalities must be eliminated, and we need to turn all these water climate challenges into opportunities for our country's sustainable development. Leave no one behind shouldn't be just a nice SDGs motto. We need to educate and disseminate what this means and work together in the effective water climate solutions we urgently need. Thank you.
All right, you saw two videos. Unfortunately, one disappeared on us, but we will repair that. So to start us off, I would like to add to the video from ADENIKE. Thank you very much for your video. It gives a very clear picture on what keeps you busy. You are a director of the Green Institute. You are a well-known researcher. You have published yourself. And I think it's quite important to hear what you are researching and how this can help with equality and with women being able to do what they need to do or help them. So ADENIKE, the floor is all yours. Go ahead.
So I'm currently researching in a coastal community in Nigeria. The name of the people in that community is the Elijah women. And in the Elijah community, there's a lot of oil exploration activity. There's a lot of course, they're affected by climate change being in the coastal community because of sea level rise and a lot of anthropogenic activities that are going on in that region. And the problem with that is that even though everyone is affected by the effects of climate change, as said by LESHA, women are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. When you visit a community like Elijah in Nigeria, for instance, and even globally, 70% of the world's poor are women. And in Elijah community, the people, in terms of economic activities, those women rely on fishing as a way to sustain themselves. And because of all the climate change activities going on in the sea level rise, the pollution by oil companies, there's been a lot of decline in the fishing activities, which is hard for women to manage their household and even food security. And in this community too, women lack land ownership. So what happens is that when there is a flooding event, men tend to migrate, and the women, it's harder for them because they have kids and they are more attached to the society. And we've also seen a lot of issues of gender-based violence because there are young girls that need to travel to go get clean water, and maybe on their way back, sometimes they're usually being raped. During my research in that community, I also met a woman that one of her child was drowned in the water in the middle of the night, and they didn't even know when it happened because they lack access to even electricity, to the basics. And unfortunately, when they found the child was already dead because they can't even take the child there's no accessible hospital or primary health care in those regions. So yeah, so a lot of things are going on in that community. Because one, there are no facilities or sustainable governance in those regions. And there's also some patriarchal things going on in which that women can't have a say in terms of how they're being governed, or even have a say in terms of how some of those resources can be managed. So economically, they're affected because they're mostly fishers. Socially, they're affected because of diseases, a lot of non-communicable diseases. A lot of women have been recorded to have stillbirths because of the water, the polluted water. There have been reported cases of cancers in those communities, and women are more vulnerable to those effects. And so that's socially, and of course environmentally, the whole community, as you can see in the video that I showed, has been completely degraded. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to you later. But maybe you want to think a little bit about, with the research you've done now, what would be the best intervention, help, change of scenery that you think would be most effective to help these women, and of course, who should be doing it. Okay, having said that, I'm very quickly going to CARLA TORANZO from Peru. She is a civil engineer. She is the CEO of Agua Global. It's good to see you again, CARLA. You are a very active person. I hope that you can enlighten us on the activities of your organization, and also the advice you give some or all of us to make situation better. CARLA, the floor is totally yours.
Thank you very much, LESHA. Thank you for each of the organizers of Cassandra. This is a great space. And well, from Agua Global, what we are doing, we have designed a set of solutions for us in Latin America to really advance towards the targets of SDG 6. As I mentioned before, in Latin America, we have more than 30% of water resources globally, but unfortunately, most of our people don't have water security. The gaps we have in water and sanitation are huge. More than 90% of the wastewater is not treated. It's not adequately treated, and it's affecting our water sources and the system and the environment in general. And in this set of solutions, we have put the human right to water and sanitation at the center, and we are promoting also, for example, circular water economy. And of course, part of this set of solutions is to have on board, with a leadership role, women, because women in this moment are not the main decision makers. Even we are leading the situations, the management of water in our houses, in our homes. We have to face, for example, when we have these huge floods and the sewage systems collapse, Normally, mothers, women are the ones in charge of taking care of all the family members. When the men of the family is going to try to continue working in these desperate situations because they need the earn for surviving, but women are in charge of taking care of children. The situation is critical. Hospitals don't have water. Medical posts don't have water. So the problem is really complicated. And the ones that are solving things in the field are women. So we need their knowledge, we need their capacities, we need their empathy to really have new solutions. As everybody knows, we are very far to achieve SDGs in 2030. And in a specific SDG 6, in the case of Latin America, we have several studies that say that we are not going to achieve SDG 6. So we need to change things. We need new leaders on board, and we need women's really helping designing new solutions, taking the value of all her knowledge for all, because we work to solve these problems for all, for women and men.
Okay, that's a strong message, and I will have the same question to you, Carla, when I come back. What is good examples of the actions that can be taken to assist the women? And maybe to add to your plea, I think we're talking here about reaching at least 2 SDGs, 6 and 5, equality. Because, for instance, I believe strongly that if women have better access to water and sanitation, but also more say over water and sanitation, and not just the wash, but also their environmental surroundings, that is in itself already a key for emancipation. Having said that, that is very bad. Apologies, everybody. I wanted to go and introduce DOHA to you. DOHA ZAMEL. She at the moment she works for the Union of the Mediterranean, an organization that encompasses countries in the north of Africa and in the south of Europe, surrounding the Mediterranean, obviously. And one of their main activities, I would say, DOHA, is to work on water management, but also on the nexus between civil society involvement, food security, water, and migration, I should add. So I'm happy to see you, and please give us your thoughts. DOHA, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, LESHA, for this presentation. Well, I just want to clarify that amongst the activities that we're undertaking here in the UFM, in the Union for the Mediterranean, is, as you said, how the advancement of the achievement of the integrated water resources management in the region, but also to advance the achievement of the SDGs, on particular SDG 6. However, we really don't have specific activities that link gender equality to climate change, although the link is so clear. But being here today, I was so glad to delve more in these dimensions of this interconnectedness, and to share with you these findings from a MENA region perspective. So, as we all know, in many parts of the Mediterranean, water resources are under pressures due to a combination of factors, including population growth, urbanization, and sustainable water use practices. And as a result, women are forced to spend hours every day collecting water from distant sources, which takes time away from other activities such as education or income generating work. And I would like to share with you some findings of a study done by both UNICEF and the World Health Organization to highlight the suffering, let's say, of women in regards to bringing water to their households and communities. So this study finds that globally, women are most likely to be responsible for fetching water for households, while girls are nearly twice as likely as boys to bear the responsibility and spend more time doing it each day. Women and girls aged 15 and older are primarily responsible for water collection in 7 out of 10 households without supplies on premises, compared with 3 in 10 households for their male peers. Girls under 15 are also more likely than boys under the same age to fetch water. Women and girls spend a collective 200 million hours each day collecting water, and those living without a toilet spend over 250 million hours each day finding a place to go. These long journeys by foot, often more than once a day, can leave women and girls vulnerable to attack and often precludes them from school or earning an income. Women and girls usually have the responsibility of fetching water, which can be dangerous, time-consuming, and physically demanding task. And moreover, the lack of access to safe water, safe and reliable water, has a significant impact on women's health, and this is more exacerbated in the times of the extreme weather events such as floods and droughts, but also in the times of conflicts, because unfortunately now water is weaponized and water infrastructures are being targeted, are being demolished and destroyed. So they found themselves often responsible for providing clean water for their families, and sometimes they are obliged to rely on unsafe sources of water, which can lead to health problems such as waterborne diseases. Hello, can you hear me? I cannot hear you, Lesha.
I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you. Thank you very much.
This was more or less what the kind of interconnectedness between the gender equality and climate change in the MENA region.
Okay. So there's still a big task for you, right? To persuade the members of UFM to do more on the topic, I would say.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
I will talk to my friends again. So I want to remind our participants that you can still put in questions through the platform that you are on. There is a function for that. Just click on it, tell us who you are, and give us your questions or your remarks. And we'll try and address that. At the moment, I don't see any yet. So that means I'm going back to my earlier question. ADENIKE, what, in your research, what kind of insight did you get? What kind of action would you recommend that's going to be taken to assist the women that you spoke to?
Yeah, so one thing we found out was about 39% of women in those regions complete secondary education. And that is a problem. So first, I think climate education, not just climate education, education in general needs to be prioritized. So it doesn't have to be necessarily formal education, but just conducting like workshops and trainings. Like what we did was we did some trainings and workshops for some of the women, and we used indigenous, the language, to explain what climate change means, and we also explain through like folk tales and things like that. And it's they already know what climate change is. It's just the way it's being explained to them. So more education awareness on climate, on how they can adapt, and also to help them to diversify their source of livelihood, so they don't have to depend on fishing, for instance. So we can look into other things, like also letting them have access to microfinance loans or some kind of carbon credits that they can also do businesses outside of fishing, so they can learn like crafts and other businesses in their environment. In coastal communities, they have lots of water, but they've not been exploring things like hydroponics, for instance, or how they can vertical farming, and they have the resources. So maybe if they are trained in that field, then they can find a way to scale up, and that way they can be encouraged economically, so they don't have to depend on climate dependent activity like fishing. Also, I think women need to also, if you look at the statistic, just about 30%, less than 30% of women hold seats in the national parliaments. So which means that the voice in climate policy is very, very limited. So we need to find a way to increase female representation in governance, in decision making, and provide very gender specific training and resources. For instance, we've seen a lot of projects like where I'm researching, they have Women for Sustainability, and which are great examples of how local knowledge and leadership can be transformed into mitigating the effects of climate change. And also healthcare access. There was a program, before I talk about healthcare access, there was a program that was sponsored by the Canadian government. It's called the Afro-Plastic Challenge. And the idea was to kind of find a way to solve marine plastic related issue, and even climate related issue. And what that did was they had a lot of people come out, and one of the criteria for the project is that women have to be represented. So you're not just looking at the economic aspect of the project or the environmental aspect of the project. One of the criteria is that the project has to solve a problem relating to women, and part of the leadership of the startup has to have certain percentage of women. And we saw a lot of businesses, a lot of startups, a lot of creative ideas, local solutions come up, and they were funded. And some of those projects are already, they're already significantly making an impact. So we have some programs like that will also be good. And also policy advocacy. So I think the problem in Africa is not about policy. The policies are there, but the implementation of those policies. So we have to ensure that at the local and the national level, that we ensure that there's the climate action plans are inclusive and of course gender sensitive, and also building resilient infrastructures. So in coastal communities, most of the houses are already destroyed due to the impacts of climate change. So we have to start looking at what other ways, looking at how can we maintain their vernacular architecture, but still make sure that they're prevented against the impacts of climate change. There have been a lot of funding for that. It's just that they've been mismanaged. There's a lot of foreign interventions and even national interventions to build embankment walls to make sure that they're protected from the sea level rise. But those money are not put into the right place due to corruption. So we have to make sure that when there are interventions, we need to find a way to make sure that they are being checked, to make sure that the money goes to where it's supposed to go to. And I just think that we don't need to, especially from looking at it from an African context, we don't need to look too much outwards. They already have the knowledge, but it's more indigenous, and we just need to help them harness what they already know, so that they can.
Okay, so I hear 4 areas of action. One is education. So there, my comment is always: do we give them a certificate? Do we give them a diploma, so that people know they went to this course, they know what they're talking about, and get recognition outside the group that they were, educated in. Because a lot of cases that people just don't even realize that they have the knowledge, so it's not just educating them, but also give them something like, hey, you see, I know what I'm talking about because they gave me a diploma or a certificate. I think, that would be part of my advice. And I think a second one, very important, what you're saying is that the money is not reaching the right people and the right activities. This, of course, is not just a Nigerian problem. It's a worldwide problem. And I think it's particularly stressful for women, because in a lot of cases, I think one of you also mentioned that, women are not seen as, oh, they can handle money. They think it should go to whatever, and not to the women that always prove that they can handle money very well. But that notion is something that I think we need to advocate more with donors, with sponsors, with policymakers. Give the money directly to the women and let them do the work that they're good at. I think a third one is your plea for the healthcare. You mentioned that before, the absence of it, but also the high need for it. I would say that's also a problem everywhere, and probably also not just not being there enough, but also again not focused on the women and female child. So yeah, that would be sort of my reaction to what you said. And I think it would be very good if you would be able to document some of these interventions as well, so that we can spread the word and make it more accessible also for others that have that experience yet. And I'm going to Doha, because you raised your hand. Please, I think you want to comment on what ADENIKE said.
Exactly. Actually, I just want to comment on something that you just mentioned regarding how this stereotype of women not are capable or not on the measure to handle money, to handle the projects when it comes to water and so on. Because as I mentioned, this is a stereotype that should be broken, because this is not true. And actually, many studies have proven this is not the case, because according to a FAO study, across 15 countries in Africa showed that water supply project designed and run with the full participation of women compared with non or partial participation were more sustainable. So I just wanted to say this, because I see this is something worth it, and worth mentioning, and we really need to change the narrative of women are not capable of managing the water projects.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Andika, you are coming back to us with a second comment.
No, it's just a quick one. I was just going to agree with Doha and what she said about women on. There was a study that was actually conducted in the community that we're currently researching. So what we did, what the organization did, was to give micro loans to. They gave the loans to men. So they asked them to pay back very small interest. So it's just kind of like, just hypothetically, you borrow like $10, then you pay back $11. What they found out was that more than 87% of the men defaulted on when they're supposed to pay back the loan. So they didn't pay back, and some of them didn't even use the money for the businesses what it was intended for. So they now tried it out with the women, because they didn't have the intention to give it to the women in the first place. Because what they did was they consulted with the community, the king. So they said, oh, let's give it to the men. So when they gave it to the women, they found out that not only the women pay back, they were able to use the interest, the profit they make from the business to send their kids to school and also make food for the family. So I just wanted to corroborate what you both said.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we have the examples also from India, the Graham Bank and others. that had the same experience, I think the number there was extremely high. I think 98% of the women paid back the loans, and the men were nowhere to be seen. So, and this is both the women stressing that they can handle it. If they're asked, don't be very shy and say, I don't know how to do it, because they do. But it's also the finance people saying, you are taking a big risk by giving the money to the men, and you have a smaller risk if you give it to the women. So why are you not doing that? I think we should keep hammering away on that. Carla.
Yes, well, from my side, I think that we really need urgently effective public policies and projects. We need to revolutionize what the things that we are doing now. If we already know that they are not effective, why we continue with the same public policies that are leaving aside women instead of capitalizing their knowledge, their talents to solve our common problems in water and sanitation? And I mean all the targets of SDG 6, so integrated water resources management, all the things that are in SDG 6. I think that we need really to analyze all the chain and check each hotspot, which is preventing human to leader wash projects, wash programs, and to solve the situations in the field, as I mentioned before. And I took note of one of your ideas, LESHA, about donors. We need that donors give money to women, but not only in the communities, in all the levels, because, you know, for example, in Latin America, most of the ministries of water and sanitation, of agriculture, are topics related to STEM, and most of them are led by men, and most of the decision makers in all the chain are men. So we need to analyze all the change to really design new public policies that are effective. And we only need not only the money to give money to women, but we really need to avoid bureaucracy, because bureaucracy is not only in the current public policies of the countries, it's in how donors really give money to efficient, you know, NGOs or nonprofits that are like starting, and it's very difficult. So I think that we need to really change all the chain. And I think that we don't need only to change the narrative, but you know that behind several projects that are success, several initiatives that are success, you know, women are behind that success. We need not only to change the narrative, but only to show that the designers of those initiatives are women, but we don't have the visibility. Well, that's my proposal, to really change public policies and projects.
And who can do that? Who should do that? How do we mobilize people to join forces? I mean, if I look around, I see numerous women's networks, women's researcher. So there are loads of them around, but they're all operating in a small, relatively small space. And how do we make sure that, first of all, we know from and about each other? And secondly, make sure that the general message, the collective message, reaches the decision makers. How do we do that? More online conferences, or seeing each other more, or a better platform for information exchange, or... Okay, Carla, yes, go ahead.
LESHA, maybe to identify some men that are leading the sector globally and in the countries, and direct some strategic project we all together to really convince these men. What I have seen, for example, is that these men, when they have the power, they really don't take care about trying to give women more space for decision making. But for example, when they have daughters several years after, And their daughters are, for example, in the STEM, also in STEM, they studied engineering, civil engineering, or whatever. Then they, in that moment, they say, well, when I was taking the decisions, I never helped women to really take leadership. And now my daughter is suffering what I could change in the past. So we need to select some men, some global leaders, and convince them, maybe with a program or something, and convince them. Because, as you mentioned, we are not really, we don't have the women groups globally, we don't have the strength at the moment, no? I think that.
Okay. Doha, I see your hand going like, this is interesting. Would you like to add to it? You're muted.
Yes, I just want to add one thing. Actually, it's a question that I myself didn't find an answer for it, and maybe you can help me find an answer, because I can see here a discrepancy, a contradiction between what is said and what is actually on the ground. Because when we some studies, when it comes to donors, some studies find that $1 out of every $10,000 is spent on climate change projects and women's rights, while the findings of the World Bank are saying that empowering women to lead climate action will get us to a greener, more prosperous future sooner. So my question here, how come we're not empowering women in this project to lead the climate change action? And while we were saying, we're finding that actually involving women in this kind of projects will grant us a greener and more prosperous future. So there is actually a need to change this narrative and urge, like Carla said, the policymaker to look at this issue from a very different perspective, and include empowering women in their policy decisions, because as I said, women have proven, or the inclusion and the participation of women, although it is it's not that considerable, but it has its impact and the effectiveness when it's come to reduce and mitigate the climate change impacts.
Well, they have a saying, behind every powerful man, there is an even more knowledgeable and powerful woman. And sometimes I think we have to be very keen on finding that woman in the shades, and say, okay, who is helping you? Who came up with this wonderful speech? Who came up with this draft for a new policy? Who was that? And actually, ask them who helped you? Maybe that make them more aware that they're not doing it alone, and that they're heavily supported by the women with the good ideas. So just to, a personal touch, who was, if you have to think about it, who was the man that helped you most in your career to start your research? ADENIKE, do you have a male mentor?
Oh yes, I do. Yeah, so I have his name is Professor Damilola Olawi, and he's actually he's a UN, he works in the, he's also part of the UN. And I remember when I was in university, and I did environmental science. But what it made me see was that, because he studied law, so he said you can translate your science into policies and actions. So I think that kind of influenced me. So what he did was, for me personally, was to send me a lot of opportunities in this space and encourage me to apply, even when I feel like, yeah, it looks competitive, where I'm coming from, will I be picked? And when I have some several doubts, like, you need to apply. So it keeps sending me lots and lots of applications, and sometimes help me look into those applications until I had a lot of confidence on my own. And I also think, not just that, I think also we need to look at in the nuclear family. So I think change starts from the home, because we've been talking about men, but I feel like especially from an African perspective, that women are even the custodian of patriarchy, because in the homes, it starts from the home. Like when you tell the female child, oh, you can't do this, or you can't study science, or this is a man's, for instance, you can do engineering, yeah, it's a man's world. And a lot of women, they tell their daughters that, like, for instance, in some African home, or most African homes, the boys are not allowed to, they don't do anything, domestic activities or anything. Is the girl child that cooks and clean, and at the end of the day, even in terms of inheritance, it's given to the male child, and money is given more to the male child. And some of these things are actually from the mother, because women have a very, very strong role to play in the life of the boy child and the girl child. So I think one thing that we need to identify before even moving on to mentors, because funny enough, up until like my master's level, most of my mentors are mostly men that pushed me. It was not until after PhD that I started knowing, intentionally looking out for women that I can look up to or can model what they're already doing. And there are very, very few of those women, but they're there. So we just have to go out there and search for them. But I think ultimately it starts from home, the home.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Women have a lot.
I think in a lot of cases, we also have to persuade the grandmothers and the mothers that maybe they want to look again and hear themselves speak. What are they actually telling their daughters and granddaughters? Because it holds them back. They already think they can't do it before they're even, going to school. So that's a very sad thing, isn't it? So, Carla, what is your experience?
Well, about a male mentor, yes, I had one at the very beginning of my career 25 years ago when we were together building a highway in the Andes of Peru near Bolivia at the south. And I met one civil engineer that was, that professionally was excellent. So I admire him professionally, but a great difference of him that was empathy. So I think he saw me like a daughter. In that time, internet was starting. And when you are in the work, then you come back home once each 2 months, for example. And I remember he usually said, hey, I'm going to Lima. Don't you want to write a letter for your parents? I can take it to their home and so on. So I think there are also good professionals that are that has empathy. Maybe we can find also this kind of men that you don't have to invest a lot of time to sensitize, but that they already are sensitized with human, with human professionals, with human in general.
Okay, Doha.
Well, for me, unfortunately, coming from Middle Eastern background, I didn't have a mentor, at least at the beginning of my career, but I can tell that at a certain stage, late stage of my current career, of my humble career, I met a few mentors, male mentors, that really empowered me and helped me to have a role in this water community. And I can mention their names. One of them is Richard Illerman, who's the organizer, the main organizer of the Cassandra Conference, and our Deputy Secretary General Al-Mu'taz Abadi, and last but not least, Bern Golick. they all helped me to be part of a publication which is called The Gateway to the Future of the Mediterranean, the WIFI Nexus Water, Energy, Food, and Ecosystem Nexus in the Mediterranean region, in which I took a very consistent and very important role in this publication. And this really meant a lot to me as a water expert working in the water community.
Okay. From where I come from, Doha,
Sorry.
every time from where I come from,
Okay.
every time a woman says, my humble experience, my starting career, I tell them, no, 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 no. Don't use that word. Just don't use it, because you're humbling yourself. Don't do that. And I know it's more in your culture to be, you know, a little bit laid back, but I firmly believe that if we want to get women somewhere, that we have to shout from the rooftops how well we are doing. And that a lot of it is our own energy and our own knowledge and our own. Okay, having said that, ladies.
Okay, I'll take good note of this. Thank you, Lesha.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's just an advice. It's just
Okay,
an advice.
thank you.
We have 3-4 minutes left, so I would like to go back to our original challenge. What would be the most important intervention that you think we should take to get better resources to the women, or get the more decision-making power, or anything else that you deem to be important? And I think you all have 1 minute left. So in this case, Doha, I'll give you the floor first.
Sorry, say the question again, because I was not really following.
What is your absolute priority, your absolute first thing you want to do to better the situation of women in the context of climate change? What is on the top of your list?
Well, empowering women. This is my my first word, empowering women through improved health, education, and representation in government, allowing them to be more present and active in all departments. This is very crucial for them to be heard, because and empowered, because if women are not empowered, they cannot be heard.
Okay. Carla.
Well, the revolution for effective public policies. We urgently need to do that. And for effective projects that involve really women. And for that, we need leadership.
Okay. Andika, the last word is to you.
Yeah, so my colleagues have said everything. So I'll go back to what I've said before, that change starts from home. And as we need to implement change from the family level, and that can create like a ripple effect leading to broader community and societal transformation. So we need to start from the grassroots and empower women from the households. Thank you.
Okay, for me that was very clear. And I want to thank all of you for your contributions. Yes, and ADENIKE, of course we can stay in touch, no problem whatsoever. Carla, I'm sure I'll see you in the near future again. Doha, thank you very much. It was nice meeting you, and say hello to your colleagues in UFM.
Absolutely.
I'm checking with our technician for a last time, because I didn't see any other okay. ADENIKE, I'm putting my email address in the chat. I know. I'm just misusing your chat. box. Okay, ladies, thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers to inviting us. And sorry that HADEEL couldn't join us, but we will catch up with her, no doubt, in the near future. So thank you very much. This ends our session at the moment. And I'm sure the organizers have a message for you for the next event or session. See you all, stay safe, and send me all your good examples. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.